Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for choosing this panel. I do believe we will deal with very interesting topics. And, well, at least myself, I will learn a lot of things that I don't know, and even some topics that are very attractive. Well, I would like to introduce Professor Horacio Miguel Arana from the Universidad Abierta Interamericana in Argentina, with the topic of what's wrong with sustainable development goals. Please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. And the title of my paper is just a rhetorical question. Everything is wrong with sustainable development goals. But although I have to speak for 15 minutes, so I try to explain a little bit more. When in 2015 the United Nations reached the agreement to extend what had until then been the Millennium Development Goals, an agenda was set as an action for the people, the planet, and the prosperity. The statement mentions the existence of three dimensions of sustainable development defined as economic, social, and environmental. The SDG document raises the impossibility of achieving the objectives without a global partnership composed of governments, the United Nations, the private sector and civil society, and argues that due to improved interconnection and communication between regions, there is a fast spread of financial and economic crisis, as well as conflict, diseases, and natural disasters. And somehow they think that they can manage it. Solutions, according to the UN, should arise from strengthening public policies, regulatory frameworks, and finances with effective and accountable institutions, rational policies, and good governance at all levels. Every year, the panel publishes a report to follow up the SDGs, and the last two ones noted that they are not well functioning, and especially in reducing poverty and the SDG 2, that is zero hunger, and it has increased the hunger in the world. So maybe there are some things that are not going as they thought it would be. So what is wrong? First of all, while reference is made to the importance of private sector and entrepreneurship, they are ultimately reduced to a secondary role and governed by public sector decisions. Hence, the criticism that we could make from the perspective of the Austrian School of Economics are almost unlimited. I just keep on with some of them. The first one is the idea of the global central planning. This is perhaps the main mistake that can be found in such initiatives. It arises from the belief that international bureaucrats have about the possibility of finding the best use of resources without considering the realities of individuals in each region. Hayek teaches us that spontaneous orders can generate a much more complex order that could be achieved from organization with a deliberated project. He argues that spontaneous orders have great advantages because they not seek any particular objective, allowing the achievement of numerous objectives that are often in conflict, and it is not necessary for that to be agreed in terms of expected results. It is only necessary that each member of society can use their own knowledge for their personal purposes, having the best chance of success. A second problem is that not recognizing the role of governments and multilateral agencies in financial crisis and the ignorance of functioning of the market price system. More than one opportunity refers to the problem generated by financial crisis and price volatility, while it is considered that development banks need to be strengthened by the IMF and World Bank system to monitor country situations and participate in problem solving. For this purpose, they suggest extending the powers of multilateral agencies while extending financial systems regulations to avoid the use of instruments they consider highly speculative. In this regard, it should be noted that international financial markets are one of the most regulated in the world, and this was already happening in the last crisis. What is never included in the analysis of these agencies and the governments that make up is the role that central banks play in generated speculative bubbles, the huge failures in multilateral banks when analyzing the finances of the countries and provide new loans or guarantees and price distortion stakes in different markets when, in the face of bursting bubbles, investors turn to financial derivatives with commodity guarantees like food and oil. In addition, they should bear in mind that the cost imposed on entities to comply with the new regulation causes small ones to disappear, concentrating the market and fueling the growth of groups that then turn out to be too big to fail. A third point is the loss of incentives with a progressive tax system. Mises said that while taxes are necessary, progressive levies on income and assets are nothing more than spoliation to those most capable of society. In addition, in Human Action mentioned that progressive taxes are regressive because individuals would use the additional funds for investments in new capital, while the state ends up using them for consumption expenses, with results in a paralysis of technical progress and productivity with a consequent brake on raising real wages. Another point that Mises mentioned is that the progressive systems act as a kind of insurance for those already established, because they are left in a privileged position by preventing new competitors from entering the market and generating an immobility that hinders economic progress and makes property a privilege. This could be partially explained why it is so easy to find supporters of redistribution through progressive imposition among businessmen. Rothbard argues that such taxes increase incentives to be part of the group that lives outside production while reducing the production base, because progressive taxes impact wages, land income, interest, and earnings, reducing the incentive to generate new income. We also learned from Rothbard that there is other additional damage caused by this type of tax, which occurs to savings and investment by bonifying the results of individuals' time preference, leaving not effect on investment in marginal projects whose funds will be earmarked for consumption, thus preventing the formation of new capital. A fourth point is public investment. Public investment is often taken as a kind of lifeline when conditions are not given for the private sector to make, or as a source of countercyclical measures. In this regard, we can point out that, as is indicated by Hazlitt, we cannot lose sight of the way that the funds used by governments in such works are obtained by levying, so the counterpart of a public salary created is a private salary destroyed. The fifth point is the public debt. This is a very much related point to the previous one, and both Mises and Bauer discuss the drawbacks of public borrowing for investment. Mises tells us that the state never achieved the accumulation of capital because the funds earmarked for it were obtained through taxes, and somehow the debt funds always ends up going to consumption expenses. Interventionist politicians do not take into account that to overcome scarcity there is no alternative but to accumulate new capital and criticize frugality, as Mises says, by filling their mouth against so-called excessive savings, advise expending more and restrict production, achieving without proposing misery and social disintegration. Peter Bauer mentions the vicious cycle of indebtedness that occurs from the international lending system for less developed countries, which, being on favorable terms, are taken and used unproductively, which leads to new indebtedness. Another important point is the official development assistance. The attention to the failure to achieve the planned objectives, the United Nations agendas will systematically return to the same mistakes. All the documents of the SDGs attach major importance to ODA, even though as early as 1972, Peter Bauer had made a devastating criticism on this point. In his work, he explains that the aid system is a handout, and that assuming that the argument that foreign aid is indispensable for development is true, leads to the conclusion that without arms, poverty prevents capital formation. He finds that ODAs has adverse effect because it favors the assumption of gratuitousness of development prerequisites, encourages the idea that resources should be contributed by others, diverts attention for the causes of poverty, stimulates policies that reduce income level and interferes with the market. In addition, countries that provide aid often put barriers to products from the countries they try to help. On the point of tax redistribution, Bauer explains that its objective, either at the national or international level, is to improve the situation of the poor. But if this is not achieved with internal redistribution, international redistribution is likely to nor does it come, since it is channeled through the governments of these countries. Deaton, who is not especially Austrian, but a Nobel Prize, took what Peter Bauer said, and he almost said that inequality is often a consequence of progress. Poverty, deprivation, and precarious health arise as a result of lack of freedom. He also criticizes ODA because he believes that the illusion of aid is an inconvenience in improving the lives of the poor and arises from the misconception that it is possible to eliminate poverty through donation. And an Argentine economist, Agustín Echevarne, says that inequality is only unfair if it arises from any privilege. For this author, the important thing is equality before the law that allows everyone to have the same rules to develop their potential. Norton and Gardner in 2008 mentioned that the greater economic freedom increases growth and per capita income, which should result in a reduction in poverty, although it is expected that it will take some time before its effects are felt. The best way to reduce poverty is to promote strong institutions and policies that promote economic freedom. As conclusions, we can say that despite the warnings and the large amount of literature against, multilateral agencies continue to offer fictitious solutions based on the same recipes that have already failed. They propose interventionist economic policies such as stimulus packages, minimum wages, and redistribution without listening to other voices. It is paradoxical that consumerism is criticized and at the same time measures are recommended to incentivize present consumption to the detriment of the savings essential to achieve the consumption and responsible production that the same organisms preach. The conclusion is clear. In order to achieve greater development, combat poverty, achieve equality before the law, and combat unemployment, it is necessary to open up to trade, to achieve sound institutional frameworks, respect for the legal order, and above all, respect for the property rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation of Professor Arana. Well, I don't need the microphone. I am baritone. So, well, thank you very much, Professor Arana. It was very clear, your presentation, but I am sure that somebody else can ask some questions. Please. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for your presentation to a very urgent topic. My question is a rather short one. I'm interested, what is your personal opinion about the driving powers behind this agenda? Do you think it's merely stupidity, or do you expect, or do you think there could also be a big socialist agenda behind this current development?
Okay, I don't know how to translate it to English, but in Spanish, SDG are ODS, and I said this otro desastre socialista is something like another socialist disaster. I think that's what you're asking for, but I also think that we liberals were too comfortable in the last 30 years, and we let the leftists manage the agenda, the Foro of Sao Paulo and now Grupo de Puebla, and we thought that with the fall of the Berlin Wall, we were to live in a capitalism world, and it's not happening. We just left. I think that the leftists noticed that Marx was wrong, but how's the name? The Italian Marxist Gramsci. I'm sorry. Gramsci was right. We let them. We let them manage the education, the policies, the media, and now we are wondering why we are at the same point that 100 years ago.
Yes, but as Marx says, the socialist concept is only livable on a global scale. So like with this UN development goals, for the first time it's really attacking the world as a whole. Like if you want to, you really interpret a lot of old Marxist philosophy and strategies into this. Like there is a bunch of literature also from Soviet ex-KGB agents who, for example, Anatoly Golitsyn or Yuri Bezmenov, Jan Sejna, who just says since 30 years that there is a big strategy behind this, and which now takes place. They already said in the 1970s, 1980s. So it's like if you just want to listen to what they said in these years, and you look at the developments now. From my perspective, it's quite remarkable how far and how long-term predictions there have been made.
I would like to underline that he's the lecturer, not the
I think I agree with you. Maybe we can talk about it later. But there is an agenda. It's not United Nations agenda. There is an agenda of socialism, and to try to make the world go to that side. I don't know how many time it would take for us to fight against it.
Please, very short question and very short answer, please, because we don't have. I must be strict.
Okay, I take that.
Hello. I would like to ask you about Argentina, because the exchange market is very small and it's very difficult to gain money with the exchange market. And I think the exchange market is a way of the main institution of capitalism, I think, one of the main.
Okay. You cannot have a big exchange market if you don't respect property, you don't have policies that are at least continuing. I think it's worth to have frequent changes in policies that to have a bad policy that continues in the time. You cannot fight again what you can't see. But Argentina, it's impossible to answer in 1 minute.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.